Great, thank you everyone. So Kianda, we'll move over to you, and so you can go through this exercise and then kick us off. And the objective is really just to get a brain dump from your brain on 101 related to LMS accessibility. And we're recording this so that we can embed this in the onboarding materials for the team members who will be joining us over the next week or two, of which there will be probably about as many as there are on the line right now. So hearing the introductions will be helpful, and also having this content.
So I want to first start by validating my eligibility to take up this time today. You can call me Kianda. I have over 15 years of experience, and I guess you could call it innovative and accessible application of educational technology to support the operative and pragmatic transformations for various areas. So after earning a PhD in educational leadership, I concentrated on digital learning technologies, and I learned that this profession took me to a lot of unique places, a lot of unique opportunities to engage and to examine digital access as well as accessibility. Lastly, I'm an active board member of W3C, WCAG, and the ARIA project, where I currently collaborate with WCAG on the next generation of the success standards. And currently the federal government supports the Web Content Accessibility Guideline 2.0, but within the next year or so, we're going to go over to 2.1. That will be released, and I'm part of the Silver team, and that's part of the development and testing team for the accessibility criteria for the refresh for the 2.1, if you're familiar with WCAG. So I'm here today to share with you just some practical knowledge regarding the accessibility and the Blackboard LMS. But a quick housekeeping item, we only have a short time, so I'm going to try to squeeze in as much as possible. And due to the time constraints, I'm asking that if we don't have time to get to your questions today, if you could please email me your questions, and I'll address them in a follow-up email to the group. Just because your questions, they might provide information for someone else. Let's see. My dog is being very disrespectful. Well, first, I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm just going to cover some terminology and regarding the diversity of abilities. These are a few words that I might use today. I'm sure you've heard them before, but I'll reiterate the importance of adding these to your daily vocabulary when referring to diverse abilities. And the first word I think I'll start with is able-bodied. I'm sure we've heard that word used before, and sometimes it's used as an antonym for disabled. In phrases such as like a disabled person, unlike an able-bodied person. The referred antonym for disabled is non-disabled, or a person without a disability. The next word you'll hear me use is access. Access is not the same as accessibility. Access identifies as everyone, and that includes those with diverse abilities, those regardless of location, socioeconomic status, their device, their internet connection, etc. They have access to the technology. You'll hear me talk about dexterity, which is an assortment of mobility abilities, meaning can they move their fingers, can they scroll a mouse, can they move their arm. Assistive technology is an umbrella term. You'll hear me refer to it as AT. It includes assistive technology, adaptive rehabilitation devices. That's for people who identify as differently able. Now, this is a tricky one, and it's the word blind. Blind means you're 100% totally unable to see. That's what blind means. Partial blindness means you are partially unable to completely see. This does not include blurred vision or low vision. Low vision is diversity in textual sizing capabilities. How big or small is the text so that you can see it? And then visual impairment is a diverse sight differences altogether. So learning disability, that term identifies with cognitive impairments or those who are differently abled in cognition. I never use the word learning disability, and I very rarely use the word disability unless it's something that I must recite from the federal government, because they do still use that. They also use handicap, which is not a word that I use. You'll hear me say someone who identifies with cognitive impairment, or you may hear me say someone who's differently abled in cognition. That just means that they have a learning disability. A11Y means accessibility. In deaf blindness, instead of saying I have a student who's deaf blind, which I've had students who were deaf blind, the appropriate terminology is a person who identifies with diverse abilities that affect their dual sensory or multiple sensory. Also, if you hear me use a term that you're unfamiliar with, just type it in the chat and I'll try to go ahead and keep an eye on it and define it. Let's get started. I'm going to first get on my soapbox real quick and then I'll step down. Each individual is unique, right? And people have diverse abilities. They are differently abled. They have skills, tools, preferences, expectations that can impact how they use the technology. So our LMS users, they may already identify with a multiplicity of diverse abilities. Now, technology tools that are designed for people with a broad range of abilities benefit everyone, including people without disabilities. We call this Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. It's important to consider the broad diversity of functional needs rather than to categorize people according to their medical classification. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to look at, because I have access to Rasmussen, if that's okay, I'll look at Rasmussen's demo course that they got for us, and we can look at some accessibility features there. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. In this, I'll just choose, there was one that really was accessible. It was the most accessible, but it did have some issues. Can you guys see that course content there?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and enter student preview mode so that you can see it as a learner would see it or a user would see it. So let's start with getting started, since it's the first one on the list. This is a SCORM module. So if there's a differently abled person with sight or cognition or dexterity, how would they see this? This looks actually like it was done in Articulate. It looks like it could have been Captivate, but it looks like Articulate to me. I'm going to verify if the user can read this. I'm going to verify it through looking through the inspect code. The inspect code will let me know if the user can actually see it, and I'll tell you a really quick hint on how that happens. I can see that there's div classes. A div class tells me it's accessible. If there are no div classes, then the chances of it being accessible are very slim. Div classes are unique ARIA labels that are assigned to different parts of HTML. So this definitely has a div class. It is readable. But we can also test this using, which we shouldn't. I know it's like a bad thing for the trusted testers, but I'm going to also look at JAWS and make sure that it's readable. Anyone familiar with JAWS? Not really. So JAWS is the most widely used assistive technology for those who are differently able with vision. So can you hear the JAWS program now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. If I was differently abled or unsighted in vision,
Level 2 welcome test.
you could normally tab through or you could use your down button.
Storm heading level 1.
So it read launch SCORM just fine. It goes over to the regions just fine. Now it skipped over these two, which is just perfectly fine. That means that it's coded as a decorative item, which is fine because it doesn't give any addition to the information. So you always want to code images like this as decorative.
This course will provide you with a broad understanding of the many elements of domestic language.
Now, see, that's where I'm going to have a problem at. You hear the blank?
You will always play a flag.
You hear that?
You will apply theory from flag. Treatment assist flag. Resources important.
Okay, so you hear that when you tab through, it constantly says blank after each period, right? This is a sentiment that you should always use your native paragraph separators. Do not use a period with the enter sign.
Accessibility combo vertical bar blackboard team.
Well, Kevin, I wouldn't say machine readable. I would say assistive technology readable. assistive technology, let me turn it off real quick.
With JAWS,
Assistive technology reads slightly different than machines, all machines. So my JAWS is going to read different than how my window eyes would read it. So that's why we don't ever want to really test using assistive technology, because they're all going to read different. It may read it or it might not. It might skip right over it. So it just depends on the type of assistive technology you're using. JAWS is the most widely used and it's the most trusted. However, there are several types of AT when it comes to impairments with cognition and dexterity, and that is window eyes. That could be NVIDIA, and NVIDIA is free. That's the one that comes, and there's also one that comes native with Windows 10. They're all going to read different, but JAWS is the most reliable. It was owned originally by Fisher Scientific, so it was the one that the government really supported and endorsed. So in here, it looks like the person, when they developed it in Articulate, they, after each period, they pressed enter twice and then got the next paragraph, right? So instead of doing that, you want to use a native paragraph separating tool. So you want to put maybe 8 points between paragraph or 12 points between paragraphs instead of using a hard enter. When you use hard enters, the assistive technology is going to read it as a blank space. Myself, as a person who needs the AT technology, I'm going to say, what did I miss? I don't know if I missed anything, because I don't know if it's really a blank line or if it's something that hasn't been labeled. I'm not sure. Also, I noticed that it was a little off in the tab order. If I try to tab through this, it goes through the address, it goes through the welcome, it goes to launch again, then it goes back to start. I would have to know to use my down key. How would I know to do that? I really wouldn't know. So that's something that you would have to fix in the course authoring tool by making sure that your tab order is correct. And that's just looking at how you align your items on your page. That's one thing with the SCORM that I noticed, but it's readable. You can navigate through it. I also noticed that if I were using assistive technology and I got out of this, I would have a hard time getting back to it, but that has something else to do with your tab order. So let's move on to course material. There's folders here, and we have a course syllabus. And it is a PDF. Great. This could actually have been done in the LMS. I always try to keep learners inside the LMS if possible, as opposed to sending them out of the LMS. Like, I downloaded it, and then I pull it up in Acrobat, Adobe, and we'll look at it this way. When I went to the tags menu, I just selected tags. This is for any of your PDFs, and trust me, you'll have a lot of them. H1, we expect to see if this is going to be heading 1. This should be a title, but it's not title. It should be. The assistive technology is going to read it just like a sentence. This is going to be header 1. That's perfectly fine. And these are the paragraphs. This is labeled as P's. Heading 1, good. Heading 2. Okay, that's great. Heading 2 looks good. Let's see, table. Okay, let me look at the table first because I can see. The table should be set up with the headers should be here and the rows should be there. I'll tell you why. The way this is set up right now, we can see the headings, table heads. So what this is going to do, it's going to read category 1, core competencies, category 2, foundational knowledge, it's going to read the heading. Then it's going to go back and say section 3, critical thinking, section 1. Is that functional use of a table for anyone using assistive technology? Not really. So if we had our headers here, we would have our rows here, and it would read category 1, core competencies, and then it would say section 3, critical thinking, section 5, philosophy, section 6, and so on and so forth. So the table is not set up and I can just see it here because it's rows. It's going to read all the rows. It's going to read all the headers first, which is unusual. And then it's going to go back and read the rows, the table rows, which means I don't forgot how to align those. That makes no sense to me. So we can run that through JAWS real quick and see what JAWS has to convey for us.
Heading Level 2 Minnesota Board of Peace Officer Standards and Training. This course aligns and training : table with 4 columns and 9 rows. Table column 1, row 1. Category 2 : foundational knowledge.
Okay, totally skipped category 1. I'm not sure why.
Category 3 : performance of peace officer duties and tasks. Category 4 : tools, techniques and tactics.
She was visually impaired.
Section 3 :
And this is going here.
logical reason.
I don't know what that aligns with because it's already read all 4 of these, and then it's going back and reading, and I don't know what they align with. So as you can see, the alignment in your tables, the way that
CCJ
they are tagged in PDF is super important. This is originally done in Word, so this would have to be fixed in Word. You can also come here and fix it as well, but it's much easier to fix it in the original document by putting your table headers in the vertical position and then having your rows horizontally. So that's the syllabus. Let me reshare. All right, I'll stop here real quick. You guys have any questions? No questions. That means I must be doing good. Or not. Oh, are landscape docs a problem? Not at all. The layout of the document is not the issue. It's the layout of the content within the document that could be the issue. So you could have however many margins you want to have. You can have a page however big you want to have it. Of course, you don't want it too long because that affects those with manual dexterity abilities. But if you are going to use that landscape layout, just make sure that it's not an enormously long document, and make sure that the content that you're laying out, it tabs in order. The tab order is logical. Make sure it's logical and it makes sense to the user. All right, so let's go on to the next thing in this course. Let's see what we have. eText is next. Okay, so this sends us to a login page, which is perfectly fine. The big thing about sending to third-party vendors is their page must be accessible. So even though it's not something that's owned by the university, we still have to make sure it's accessible. So whenever we use third-party content, we have to check to make sure that they have what's called a VPAT. And a VPAT is a voluntary product accessibility template. It's a document that explains how information and communication technology products like software, electronic content, any type of documentation, how it conforms to the revised Section 508 standards for IT accessibility. So every website usually has that. Bookshelf Ambassador, not sure, they seem like a fairly new. We can search it real quick just to see if they have a VPAT. Ambassador VitalSource should have their VPAT on their website and they don't have it listed. So I'm going to assume that they don't have a VPAT. I would not have sent students to that site because I can't guarantee that it's accessible. And we are still held liable for their inaccessible content. All right, so there's a course guide here. Let me see, it looks like it's an attachment. Okay, yeah, so it sends the students to the Rasmussen site. To their online library. So they have it looks like they have an online library where they can put content and link it to their courses as well. That's very, very convenient. However, I already see an issue. Tabs. These are not accessible at all. They can be. It's extremely difficult to make them accessible. The screen reader is not going to, it'll read module 1, module 2, module 3, module 4, 5, 6, and then it'll go to the next page. And that's because of the way tabs are coded. So if you have a course that you encounter and they are, even the tabs that come native to Blackboard, try to steer them away from tabs, because the accessibility problems with tabs are numerous. And you can do additional research on that, but you know, the key to making tabs accessible is they have to toggle the CSS code so they can display some of the properties and the area states on when the user clicks and when he loses focus. So that's the biggest thing, is just it doesn't know when I'm losing focus because it looks like all one thing to the assistive technology, so it can't tell when I'm losing focus. Let's see what, I don't know, let's see what JAWS.
All student manual. Home-CCJ20. Same page link, skip the main content. Unlabeled graphic images / ROS logo - flame 80px.
They read unlabeled and unlabeled image. Don't leave your images without alt text. If it's decorative, just mark it as decorative. If it's meaningful, you can mark it as meaningful. If it's a logo, you can just say logo. That way the assistive technology will know that it's there, and the students won't be afraid that they missed something.
Labeled graphic images / online library - cream button. List of 6 items. Link for list of 9 items next in level 1. Link general education courses.
Okay, so it's going through all of those
Link
links.
School of Business. Link School of Business. Link School of Education.
It's making them go through all of these.
Link school list of 7 items next in level 1.
It's making the learner go through all of that. That is very inconvenient.
CCJ 2685 - domestic violence course guide - ROS guide to Mutton College - Google Chrome. Link library chat. Link research appointment. Link webinar series.
I can't even make it go over there.
Pages map list. Module 6 tab. Discussion for assistance with this assignment, bullet review the step-by-step instructions on how to write a
Okay,
list with 3 items. How to write a discussion post link.
Let me use my keyboard only.
Double the link writing guide. Opera guide link. Enter untitled - Google Chrome.
Okay, see, I would have gotten lost there.
List with 3 items. Visited link Opera guide. View it as helpful.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can get my focus back.
Video demonstration link. Student success guide link. Test - taken tag.
Okay, it's reading the links. It's reading the links.
List with 3 items. Tutor match list with online writing list with 3 items. Print page link.
Now, if I want to go to module 2, let's try to go to module 2.
Report a log.
You know what it's going to do? It's going to make me go through the whole website again. I use the mouse because I'm sighted. If I were unsighted, I wouldn't be able to just click on it. So if the student, after module 1, and it read all the links to the students, it's going to then make them go through the entire, all of this again. And then they'll try to get over to module 2. Just in lieu of time, we're not going to do that. But as you can see,
list and testing level 1. Link research tool list with 10 items. Database home -
and I'm a student who has the time.
Tab selected.
Okay, so let me try to get to module 2.
Module 2 tab collapsed. To activate tab page, press space bar.
So it's press space bar.
Space.
It's not doing anything.
Enter selected expanded.
Okay, I pressed enter and it opened it. So the instructions are slightly off. It's not doing anything. That's just an example on try to stay away from tabs. It is so frustrating. It seems like they have the first page. They might have got some of the codes correct, at least where they can read the hyperlinks. But when it comes to navigating the tabs, it loses focus, meaning it's going to send the learner through the entire web page, and then it'll send them back here, and then it may or may not read the next tab. So we'll just try to stay away from that.
Google Chrome main region. Close welcome to student preview. More options for preview dash option. Frame main region.
All right, what's in
Untitled dash Google
tutoring?
Chrome. Login dash
Okay, that's a
Chrome.
third party.
Main region.
Let me see if BrainFuse has a VPAT.
Enter.
You do.
Dash Google search dash Google Chrome. Heading level 3 link BrainFuse voluntary product accessibility template dash state dot dot dot. Page has 4 regions, 20 headings and 50.
Now all of the VPATs look the same. So once you've seen one, you've seen them all. What we're looking for on a VPAT, anytime you're sending a student to a third-party provider, please check to make sure they have a VPAT. If not, we are held liable, meaning we could be sued for if anything, whatever, if they can't access the content and they fail the class, whatever. All the VPATs, because it's a template, they all are going to look the same. It's going to ask, can the learner do certain things based on Section 508 WCAG success standards. So it gives you the guidelines, and then it tells you this is the parts of the guidelines, and then it asks, does this apply to your course, or does it apply to your site, and does your site meet these requirements? And then if not, or if so, you can add any comments here. So this is going to pretty much stay the same. These 3 columns are going to be where the site owner would enter their information. Now they seem pretty accessible. Captions are not provided, but they said it's not applicable. Sign language, they said, no, we don't do that. And that's a level A, that's advanced. So you don't have to, because according to the federal law, we only have to follow level 2 guidelines, which is something like audio descriptions. So they're going to make sure that they follow all of level 2 unless it's not applicable. Level 3, you'll see, not surprisingly, there's a lot of no's because it's not required by the federal law for them to follow level 3 guidelines. Everything else is a yes. They follow all other guides. See, level 3, they said no. They even follow some low or no background audio for level 3. They got a yes there. And then once you look at the VPAT, you can approve or discuss with the faculty member if this is a site that they want to send the learners to, because it's either inaccessible or you're concerned about the accessibility. I think that BrainFuse is great. The VPAT looks good. I would definitely send my students there. So let's go to Student Lounge. All right, before I go there, are there any questions? Okay, so I'll look at this one through the Inspect tool again to get you used to looking there. Sometimes the Inspect tool will save you a lot of time if you know what to look for. Okay, I can already see that this picture is not tagged. Reason I can see that is because there is no alt text. There's no tag here, so I know it's not tagged. So the screen reader will say unlabeled image, and the learner won't know if it's an image that they needed to see or needed to understand what was happening within the image or not. Also, I'm pretty sure that they used hard enters here because of the spacing. I know they did not use native enters because natively, unless they put 0.24 as their paragraph separators, I know that they use a hard enter. Try to avoid that one, just because the students will hear the blanks and they're not sure what blank means. So the next one is, where was I? I was under course materials, student lounge. I did general course questions. I'll bet you any amount of money that that image is not tagged. What's this? Oh, download original file. What's that look like? So they want you to download another. So what you would be doing is downloading this as an image, and it's still going to read unlabeled image. So there's even a link here that says to download this, and the learner would not know what they're downloading. They're blindly just downloading anything because they don't know if they need it or not. Then once they download it, it's going to take them to the same image that's going to be unlabeled. And go to the inspector just to check and make sure, because I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. And no, if it were labeled, it would have alt text, and it's not here. It's just a 0. And sometimes if you're looking for labels, you can do a Control F in your inspector, and you can type in the word alt just to see if you can find it, if it applies anywhere. Some stuff is labeled somewhere, but it's not this image. Because if it were, when I hover over the image, it would light up. This image is right here. It has a div ID, so what it's going to do, it'll read general questions. It's going to say unlabeled image, but there's no alt text. There's nothing for me to know what that image is, and it'll also give me the option to download this phantom image that I'm not sure what it is. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes. You guys have any additional questions for our last 10 minutes?
So there's a lot to this, and you mentioned the VPAT list. VPAT is the correct term, right? And you showed us a list. Rasmussen has one, I assume, right? And we need to adhere to the standards they agreed to. Is that how I understand this? They have a set of standards that they've sort of hope are implemented, and we go based on how they prefer to comply to the standards, and we're just on the hook for that one.
Let's see if they have one. No, they don't. So and that's not uncommon for a university. Rasmussen does not have a VPAT. They have VPATs for third-party content, but not for their overall, site. So you'll just follow the WCAG, W3C, the Section 508 Standard Success Guidelines. That's what you'll follow, and that's these guidelines here, success criteria. And right now we're on 2.0, but soon you'll be upgraded to 2.0. So I wouldn't get too used to looking at this document, but this document right here is what you'll follow in order to make sure that everything is accessible and that you place on the LMS. And that goes for your Word documents as well as your PDFs. And we didn't get a chance to go through Word today, but Word has its own built-in accessibility checker, which is extremely helpful. And a PDF does as well. But Words is much better because if your document is accessible in Word, it will most likely be accessible in PDF. So that's the main one that you should do a little bit of research on if you get a chance to play around with the accessibility feature in Word. And if you get a chance, also look over these guidelines, the WCAG 2.0 guidelines. Take a look and make sure that these are things that you can really, adhere to. They have a quick reference guide here that'll just give you a quick overview, not really quick because you can see how many standards there are, right? Now, the new upgrade, the refresh, we added 17 more standards, so it's going to be great. But whenever you are designing in the LMS, just make sure that you are meeting these standards on the level AA. That's what you need to be concerned about. Level AAA, don't push yourself about it too much. Level A, you absolutely have to meet those because that is the core basic. Now, level A is required by the federal law, and level 3 is just a nice to have.
Awesome. Can you drop this link in the chat?
Absolutely.
The other question I have is, given that we're going to be responsible for turning over a large amount of work, that we're still kind of uncertain how long each lesson will take, are we expecting that the folks at Rasmussen will have people that are also going to be checking this and Because if so, we need to kind of make sure that we delineate what we're checking and what they're checking so that we can make sure that we cover everything, because this seems like a lot plus basic functionality as well. And maybe that's not a question for you, but maybe for Dara or Karen someone else. But do we know if Rasmussen has anybody who's going to be working on accessibility?
We don't. We have our sort of meeting with Rasmussen to kick off and talk about how we're going to get started. And I think questions about the QA process on both the Blackboard and Rasmussen sides really haven't been answered. So we'll need to make sure that we include that in our discussions with both Blackboard and Rasmussen.
Yeah, that's awesome because the more things coalesce into a bigger picture, and this is probably more of a discussion for our stand-up later, the more just a general QA effort seems to be visible, but there's a lot of question marks attached to that. And I just, to make sure that we deliver, and make sure that we're following this, pretty intense law, which is, I totally think is, I'm not questioning accessibility. I just want to make sure that we are on top of it in a way that doesn't jeopardize our ability to deliver. And part of that will mean some serious discussions with Blackboard and Rasmussen about what they expect and what we're capable of so that we can make sure that we service everyone who's using this.
Now, interestingly, Blackboard has another service that I'm sure they'll be very glad to talk to you about. It's called Ally. Not sure if they've spoken to you guys about their Ally accessibility service. And it's an add-on feature where it checks all the courses for accessibility. I'm not sure of the price, but I heard it's quite pricey. So that might be something, and you might want to examine too, if we see that our internal QC is being, overly, using that, like you're just using too much of their time on it. Ally is also an option, but it does come with a very steep price.
That's cool. I wonder if we are operating as Blackboard, if that wouldn't be Rasmussen's bill to foot. But that's a discussion I'm never usually involved in. So
yeah, and I think it's something that we need to establish up front as, while we have committed to delivering accessible courses, exactly what does that mean, and to what level.
Yeah, we can bring that up. I believe that the call is tomorrow with Rasmussen to talk through how we're organizing the project. I'm on that, so we can bring that to the table. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Blackboard Ally. This is their accessibility platform. So I'm sure they'll be more than happy to give you guys a demo if you're interested. But that's an option. But it's if we can do it in-house, that'd be great. But I don't know who's responsible for that or how much of the learning curve or time it might take for everyone to get up to speed. If it'll be worth going ahead and investing in this or just using our existing talent. But that's all I have today. We're at time. So if you have any other questions that you can think of, or you just think of anything that you run across, feel free to shoot me a note. Or you could email Dara or Karen or Trish, any of them, and they'll make sure that I get it. And I'll be glad to help you. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Yeah, Kianda, specifically, it's worth you knowing, because you're not on the platforms yet, as a few people here actually are not. on Slack, operationally, where we have our more informal conversations, we have a channel for QA. And so I think that ideally to create a repository of the answers to these questions, actually, if people can add their questions to that channel, if you currently have it, add them there. If not, then we'll have you add it. And then I'm responsible for making sure that you get added to that channel. But let's keep the conversation there so that as we're onboarding people, they have access to that Q&A and we don't have to go through making a fancy frequently asked questions doc. We can just have it searchable there. Does that sound good?
Sounds great to me.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And then we have another meeting in an hour. Is that our next thing? I have too many windows. 2 hours. I think it's at 2 p.m. Eastern time that we have our next stand up. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thank
And
you.
we'll get that recording, and maybe actually you can post this recording to Slack when you have it.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.